big question that we try to answer, and I think we successfully answered, to be honest, in this podcast, was how do you scale your recruitment efforts without sacrificing the very important element of quality? And who better to do it than somebody who's hired for some of the best, most recognizable companies on scale, from Google to Microsoft. There is a little bit from what you can expect in today's topic.
If I would have to boil it down to what's the one theme that every scale-up hypergrowth initiative has had in common, is that talent acquisition and scaling the engine is hard, but upholding the talent bar, is even harder, especially if you're expanding into new geographies, if you're building specialist teams and growing super fast. And ultimately, quality talent remains the differentiator. TA is expected to nail delivery. I think that's the foundation. If you're not delivering on hiring plan execution, there's no point showing up as an advisor and guiding on talent management. That's the basics you need to fulfill. But at the same time, we need to create those learning paths and get ready to be advisors, data fluency, consultative skills, being able to adopt responsible AI, and provide holistic talent management.
In a very practical way, right? We look specifically into some of the key elements you should be doing before you click go, before you start running, to help make sure that you can scale your recruitment efforts easily, effectively, without, well, there's still going to be hiccups, but ideally without as many hiccups. We also take a look into talent density, and we also take a look into the future of TA from our guest's perspective. An absolute gem of a conversation. Loved every second of it. So genuinely, thank you so much for listening. And I really do hope you enjoy what you hear. If you're thinking about scaling right now, or just curious, there is definitely something here for you. Welcome to Tea Time with Talent Acquisition, the podcast aimed at fostering knowledge and sharing stories within the vibrant talent acquisition community. I'm your host, Eden, and for the next hour or so, I'm going to be joined by a world-class recruiting leader with a career that spans some of the most iconic companies in tech, including Apple, Microsoft, Ideals, and a very short 13-year stint at a well-known business called Google, where she led hiring across both tech, sales in the EMEA and the APAC region. She built and rebuilt hiring engines at scale. She designed processes, workflows, operation models that support hypergrowth without, and this is the fundamental part, without compromising quality. More recently, she's been partnering with scale-ups as an interim TA leader, executive search specialist, and sprint facilitator, helping companies understand what it really takes to scale with discipline, clarity, and ultimately talent excellence. So I'm absolutely honored. So when you're ready, please grab your favorite tea or coffee if you prefer, and join me in welcoming today's guest, the Global Head of Talent, Kathrin. Thank you so much for joining.
Wonderful. I've been such a long fan of your podcast, Eden, and it feels a real honor to be now a guest after a series of experts who you've brought. Yeah. So hello, I'm Kathrin. I'm a global talent leader based in Germany, Munich. I've led talent acquisition, high growth tech environments, scaling both tech and sales teams from 2, 3, 4 digits in size. And I'd say I've done the whole spectrum of scale-up initiatives, from first in-market hires to scaling recruiting engines during hypergrowth. And if I would have to boil it down to what's the one theme that every scale-up hypergrowth initiative has had in common, is that talent acquisition and scaling the engine is hard, but upholding the talent bar, is even harder, especially if you're expanding into new geographies, if you're building specialist teams and growing super fast. And ultimately, quality talent remains the differentiator, always has been, and even in the environment we're in now, for every successful business to innovate, ship, and be profitable, quality people are still the differentiator. That hasn't changed.
I think that's part of, that's the key theme of what we want to go through, is obviously you've seen this incredible growth. And I think on your LinkedIn, I saw, I think it's under, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was under Google, might have been, where you had 1,800 roles filled in your team in the period of time that you was in that leading that team. that's incredibly large growth, right? And when I talk about scale ups, a lot of the teams I support in Germany will be hiring 30 to 50, 100 over a course of a year, right? And that's their scale up. So you're talking like super hyper growth, and it needs to be consistent. So there's a lot that needs to get done before we just go, right, we're going to open up 1,800 jobs. Let's get cracking. So when a company says go for it, we're scaling, we're going to go, as you mentioned, new roles, new countries, new regions, markets, whatever, right? It's going to overwhelm a lot of people, right? So from your experience, what is the absolute non-negotiable ingredients that every TA functional team need to have in place in order to hit go correctly?
Yeah. I think before you start sprinting or running, like the one foundation you need to have is a structured hiring process. Structured hiring is everything. So if you don't have scorecards in place, like your question libraries or even light competency frameworks, don't start running. I would always recommend slow down, build those foundations first, and then think about sprinting. Especially if upholding quality is really important, you need to invest in some standards, and structured hiring process is a non-negotiable. Yeah.
And do you have those types of scorecards and rubrics and whatever you want to call them internally, right? Do you have them, everything that you want to hire for mapped out beautifully in a nice ecosystem, or is it just what's coming up and you kind of need to be a bit scrumpy around it?
I think you need to be able to be super agile, iterate as you go, make them better. But I think you need to have a foundation in place, at least a go-to library, a mechanism, a standard that is agreed upon with everyone, ideally at the company-wide level. And then you can build and shape and fine-tune as you go. But I think the more enablement and brilliant basics you have in place for a truly structured hiring process, the more you're equipped. I think the faster you can sprint and also uphold and endure the marathon. So yeah, I don't think that a rigid process needs to be in place for everything, but some standards and guiding principles are really important if you want to run fast, scale the engine, and uphold quality.
Who would you say is probably responsible for initiating and driving that type of project?
The enablement bit and building the infrastructure, that 100% lies within the talent acquisition function. I think if you're the first founding recruiter in a startup or the talent leader in an enterprise company, I think that accountability truly lies with us. I'm a big believer that talent acquisition and the future of talent as well is driven by us taking ownership of quality of hire and long-term impact. And I think setting the infrastructure and the standards for the hiring process, an unbiased as possible decision-making process, that is really on us.
I think I can obviously see the importance of having that structure there. Does it differ with locations, for example? Right. So what you might set as a bar or a standard in New York, would that be the same standard that you'll have set in Barcelona, for example?
In terms of the process, I think the talent bar needs to be the same.
In terms of the talent bar, yeah.
Yeah, the bar absolutely needs to be the same. I think where you need to account for is cultural nuances or market-specific mechanisms that might not fly in a specific country due to culture, context, maturity levels. But I think if you as a business even achieve to have a hiring philosophy and some guiding principles that apply across the board globally for every product area, then you're already one step ahead and you can make really quality hiring a company-wide responsibility. So yeah, it does really pay out if you slow down at the start, get brilliant basics in place that are agreed upon and lived by everyone, and then you can iterate fast and improve as you go.
I think that agreement part is probably the bit that probably takes longer than even creating the structure in the first place, because hiring manager A just wants to get it done yesterday, and hiring manager B wants to have the process in place. And you use the phrase business enablement. So this kind of leads into that, I guess, from kind of what we spoke about the other day. For anyone who doesn't know what the phrase business enablement is, just explain that first of all.
Business enablement. I mean, to me, almost it consists of different components. As a TA leader, having led talent acquisition teams of all sizes from 5 to 50 plus, I think it's a mix of a few elements. Number one, training. Number two, probably education. And number three, empowerment. And I think the future of talent acquisition also has the RecOps and enablement sub-function as a very important component. I think it's really the operational backbone and the intelligence of every recruiting function. And then ultimately, delivering the business enablement should not be an afterthought, especially when you're hiring and when bringing in quality talent is an imperative. So very often, like when you scale hiring, you increase the number of interviews, the number of new interviewers as well, really rapidly. That comes with often new tooling, process changing, and ultimately new ways of working. So if you want the quality standards that you're setting, if you want them to stick, that successful adoption really hinges on the level of business enablement that you provide as a talent or as a people function. And what I mean with that is any tool, any structured process, any hiring philosophy you have, it actually must bring some tangible results immediately for the end user. And I think that's what business enablement is. Equipping your interviewers, equipping your hiring managers, equipping the whole company with tools, with infrastructure, as well as with a spirit and empowerment. So there's a collective responsibility and pride being built up to take ownership for bringing excellent people into the business.
I guess that's driven by, if we're bringing in a tool, bringing in a process as a talent team, we should be the drivers of that enablement. We should be the ones fighting the good fight, front and center, saying this is what we're doing and why we're doing it, right?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's very often where we don't take enough time at the start to think, okay, how do we position the why, the benefit of a process or a new tool of doing things differently? Like, give an example, like you want to enforce a 24-hour SLA on scorecard submission. Like, really think about what's the benefit to the business in terms of business value, like the reduced time in stage, yes, but you're reducing bias, you actually hit desired start dates, you ship product in time. Like, it requires a well-rounded narrative. And I think that's also part of business enablement, being able to get the buy-in, being super clear on the ROI and how it makes their life easier.
I guess it's just reframing what you would normally say just in a way that is going to appeal and land better with that stakeholder. And if I link back to what our job as recruiters ultimately are, it's sales, really. It's just switching how you are selling back to the person, say, look, this is the reason behind it. Did you believe in hard stops, in the sense if someone isn't following the process that the talent team have created, that you kind of like there's repercussions, so to speak?
Depends if they're a repeat offender or if they're a newbie. I genuinely believe, like for every change management process, right? The success often hinges on the adoption level, the level of clarity and communication you provide to get buy-in for it. Like, are you able to actually see tangible ROI quickly? And if you have, let's say, interviewers, business stakeholders not adhering to something that you believe in, is structured, is excellent, and should be done, then I think you need to go back and like try again, rethink how you can gain that buy-in, like really walking in their shoes, wearing their hat, trying to understand their pain first, and then try to bring influencing and persuasion methods that make it stick. So I think I wouldn't give up too easily, but I've actually seen also really effective ways of portraying business participation metrics to actually give business leaders or a CEO a scorecard that clearly shows, here is how your business leaders are showing up in terms of scorecard submission, interview availability, interview cancellations. And that actually can help you in aggregate to firstly reward the role models and then as well focus on those low performing areas or problem areas that require improvement.
I like that as well, because I do find that middle management and upper management is somewhat very difficult to see some of the results they're doing in other areas that aren't directly related to their team, especially if they have like a performance bonus attributed to their role. Great, your team's performing and it looks fantastic on from a team perspective. But if you're dropping, so to speak, in other areas of the business, then that should also be highlighted, and that could then impact obviously negatively on a bonus if that's what you're going after. And sorry if someone's bonuses now gets affected because of it, but I do think it's important. That can help. You look at not just the team performance, but you look at the personal performance across the entire business. We've got business enablement, we've got kind of understanding the core basics. Do you think there's trade-offs in anything, right? What I mean by that is you've gone from, well, we've created a process, we've done as much adoption as we can. We're looking at different geographies, we're looking at different markets, we're looking at different roles. Is this a one-size-fits-all to everything, or is there going to be trade-offs in your bar, your quality? Because I know you mentioned, obviously, New York to Barcelona should be the same, but say you go down a period of time and it's not the same, and how do we kind of pivot away from that, or do we stick to our guns? No, this is the bar we've set. We will get that bar, even if it takes 6 more months, so to speak.
I think you mentioned a really interesting friction point, like you call it a trade-off. And I think that's ultimately where a talent leader or a people leader needs to go back to when they build, let's say, a hiring plan or a workforce plan, to have those trade-off conversations early in terms of either speed or cost or risk or quality. When and where, at what point are we willing to make trade-offs? And I think that's a very important bit as well, almost like some checks and balances you need to have in place and be super clear about before you start sprinting, right? Before you put and hit the foot on the gas pedal and you ramp up speed and volume in hiring, you need to get super clear about what are the priorities, like having a role prioritization framework in place. So let's say when crap hits the fan, that you know where to reallocate precious TA resources and business resources to, that the most critical roles will be filled. So I'd say it requires a continuous dialogue, like revisiting process, firstly having a hiring plan, or at least having priorities agreed upon, at least for the quarter, with the most senior business leaders. And from there, you can then discuss blockers to also ensure that small blockers and bottlenecks don't turn into wildfires over time. And I think part of that conversation then can be, well, do we compromise on certain skills, desired capabilities or profiles because talent market supply or our data says it's not possible in a given market, or are we being creative? So I think that's where a really good TA leader actually can come in with data and show, here are the trade-offs. If we do A, B, and C, where are we compromising? Is it the speed? Is it a location? Is it potentially quality in the sense of trade-off in certain capabilities? And I think that really requires a step beforehand, that you're really ingrained in workforce planning. So as a TA leader, that you're leaning into the hiring plan design and the role prioritization. Because once you're equipped with that knowledge of what is super business critical, that gives you so much more context to steer those conversations and bring the right people in.
Yeah. To be fair, I'll add it from a individual contributor perspective, which is what I'm mostly obviously doing now. I do that, but from a role, a single role. So instead of looking at the grander picture, what needs to be done that quarter, those are the questions I'll ask the hiring team. But if they say, because usually if it lands on my desk, it needs to be filled yesterday, usually the case. We don't always like it to be that way, but it is. But I'll ask them, what's the trade-offs in the search going to be? This is the ideal. We want to run that. But I don't want to keep coming back to you and saying, hey, I can't find this. Let me, what can we change? So I'll try and get as many to the point where they say, this is the absolute minimum we need. and we'll run it in sprints. And then, we run the sprint, we give them the profiles. Okay, we run the process, or we give the data if we can't find people, and then I can just start the next search without them having to say, try this, try that. If it's categoric, we only will accept point one, then fair enough. And as you've rightfully said, then we have to accept speed won't always be there. So it's like having that conversation up front, then at least means later down the line, if I'm on my second or my third search for whatever reason, the hiring manager is aware the whys behind it. And it's a much easier dialogue to be happening when I'm saying, look, I don't have you because of this and this, but this is what we're doing behind the scenes. So I think on a individual, we can still do that as well. And yeah, so I'll throw that in because I know we have a mixture of leaders and ICs who listen to this.
Yeah. And I think what you're calling out is that I think big chunk of the strategic work, the advisory work, actually happens far before the interview process, right? Is that expectation setting and talent intelligence that you bring to the table to actually shape a realistic profile before you go and open the floodgates.
The hiring bar, right? Because I know you're big on the quality side, obviously, which is absolutely important. We need to get quality people into the team to push things forward. You mentioned a hiring bar, right? So I have some teams, and I guess this is more of like from my own experience. I want to see where your thoughts are. I've got some companies that have bar raiser conversations, and it's across the company they have them. But then in that company, you say 1,000 people. I will have 4 teams that I work with, and 2 teams would use the bar raiser, and 2 teams wouldn't use the bar raiser. You'll make hires in all 4 teams. So does that mean that the bar raiser kind of loses its meaning, or is it unique to certain teams? I mean, I know it's difficult because you don't know the exact scenario, but in your opinion, do you think if we're going to say we're going to commit to a bar raiser, we commit, everyone does it? Or is there, again, that unique position where it's like, okay, we might be able to flex it here?
Yeah. Super interesting. I genuinely believe if you're bringing in, let's say, a bar raiser in the Amazon style, or even a hiring committee, it needs to be truly suitable for the maturity level of interviewers or overall hiring maturity you have in your business, the size of your business. And I think you need to have the operational backbone as well working to bake it into your overall flow and hiring process so it doesn't slow you down. So I genuinely believe in some sort of consistency in your process, as well as consistency in the assessment methodology. So if you're going all in on this concept, then I think it should be baked into the hiring philosophy you have, like those guiding principles that really inform how you go about hiring and talent in your organization. I think if you're a smaller stage business, like a startup, for example, there's so much more room to be innovative and flex and test these things. But I think ultimately, once you hit a certain point, as well as a certain scale, if you need to grow 2x year on year, I think a certain amount or level of standards and consistency is needed so everyone can run fast and focuses on the same direction.
I think it also removes, as you say at the beginning, removes that bias part as well. It's everyone joins the company in a fair manner. I do find, if I think back to that example, I do find the teams that opted to not use the bar raise in the end, it was speed. They had someone that they liked, and there was a prospect that they would no longer be able to get them due to something else happening, and that led them to not do the bar raiser multiple times.
Yeah. So most of the businesses I worked in did either have a hiring committee or a bar raiser type of concept, but you really need to get the business engagement and the enablement bit right, and you need to have the operational infrastructure as well so it does not slow you down. So the quality element in your hiring process needs to almost be stronger than the speed when it comes to having that additional layer or step. Because you could have a live hiring committee, an offline hiring committee, right? An additional interview done by a neutral bar raiser. There's all sorts of constellations. Ultimately, it's about making sure it fits your growth stage and your context. So copying the playbook of Amazon might not get you to the desired outcome.
Not when you're a small team, at least, anyways.
Yeah.
Where do you sit in the conversation of talent density?
Oh, okay. Talent density is high up on the executive agenda, especially in the
Yeah.
last 2 years. We've really seen a market correction, right? Away from hypergrowth we had in 21 to where profit margins, efficiencies are significantly more important than headcount growth at all
Yeah.
costs. In my point of view, talent density is more than just concentration of strong performers. Ultimately, it's a modern philosophy that describes excellence across a couple of pillars in the people spectrum. And I mean excellence in hiring, in talent management, in pay, in leadership, and feedback culture. So within the outcome being that the value of your organization and the capabilities, the skills per capita you have goes up. So it's an ecosystem. And I think it's the execution layer of talent density where most fall short.
Do you think there's anything that we can do to help bring that forward, right? Because I think that's, if I think back to some of the teams I do a lot of early stage hiring these days, and how I've been fortunate to work with a lot of YC-backed teams, right? And it's brilliant, but they all have the same talent density thought process. And it's like trying to shape them away from what YC are teaching them. It's like there are brilliant engineers and even founders at YC that didn't necessarily have the curve, or they didn't necessarily go to Cambridge or Oxford or Harvard or whatever. And it's trying to explain to them, you don't all come from the same world, yet you're now trying to find these people from that world. The logic isn't making sense, right? So it takes a long time for me to try and teach them other ways, because sometimes they are so stuck in it, which is fine. But from your perspective, is there any mechanisms or any kind of thoughts that you could share around kind of building a more talent dense team in all these elements without just focusing on just finding people from FANG, for example?
Yeah. So number one thing, don't try to force a Netflix or Revolut playbook on your business, no matter how big you are. And I think some really practical steps where you can start is actually making sure hiring is a strategic investment. So that when you're recruiting, that every additional new hire you bring in adds significant new value, new capabilities to the team. It's not just a butts in seat game. And let's go back to like when you're getting a role request from a hiring manager, making it really practical now, challenge them to really define before you release the role or allocate even capacity, define what business impact looks like in terms of real outcomes, KPI, what good looks like, specific skills, competencies, and only release the role once a leader has clarity on how that position, how that skill set and profile will add incremental, significant new value or something new to the team. I think that's where we can actually bring talent advisory capabilities as well very early in challenging, well, should we hire at all, or is there actually internal talent that can be upskilled, repurposed, or do we need to rethink how potentially technology can help as well? So I think there's a lot of friction, and it ultimately brings it back to ensuring if you're hiring, it does remain a strategic investment. So it's not a butts in seats game anymore, but actually real clarity on what is the incremental gain you're getting with a new headcount. I'd say that's where I would always start. The second important bit actually is leadership investment. And the highest performing organizations I've been part of really have seen commitment from all managers and leaders when it comes to hiring, sourcing, and retaining high potentials. So the differentiator there really is how seriously does the executive team take it when it comes to reaching out to candidates, creating a kick-ass experience, or even taking ownership for nurturing the high potentials that you've identified. Because that can't be owned and carried by the people team. It's ultimately how the leadership team is invested in making it work as well.
And I love those 2 points. And there's, as you were talking at the beginning, I'm going to share this while it's in my head. So number one is obviously that element of internal movement. I've seen a big spike in that, which is great. And there's a team, ironically, my wife works there. So a company called BPP, Jen Holm, she is the head of TA there. she had been a guest on our podcast. So if someone's listening now and is thinking, oh, I recognize that, go back January 2025, you'll find it. I do really recommend you ping her a message if internal movement is a topic of interest, just because like their team is brilliant. They do it so well, and they have a lot of internal movement in their business. And like I've never seen a team do it as well as them yet. So that's number one. Number two, in regards to kind of creating that environment itself, when you're saying about obviously you need to have all the leaders driving it, having this kick-ass process and things like that, linking back to what you said at the beginning, obviously the TA team is responsible for creating a lot of this initial movement, or do we need to kind of like partner with senior leaders outside of TA to kind of create this big movement together? Because again, I'm sitting there thinking, back to experience, I've got a lot of founders who understand we need to hire, but to them it is just a numbers game in some regard. We've got funding, we need to hit this number because we're back behind here, but it's just go, 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 go. They're not really practically thinking about it. So I'm trying to put myself in a situation of someone who's in like a mid-sized scale up, which is again a lot of our listeners, where maybe they're coming up against rebuttals from upper management around hiring. You know, they're probably doing what you're doing, trying to kick back, but upper management going, no, just hire. What can we do in that scenario?
I think it's a friction that every talent leader faces to some degree, day in and day out. I think my first step always is going back to and really articulating like the business value of high quality people you bring in, right? Like really speaking in their terms. Is it profitability? Is it profit margin? Is it increasing revenue per employee? Really like building a deep understanding of the business and the metrics and language that makes them tick. And I think that's already half of the influencing game. If you truly know what's top of the executive agenda and how can you position the importance or the criticality of an initiative or the buy-in you need in their language. Again, it goes back to walking in their shoes, understanding their pain, and making them the winners at the end of the day. Almost steering away from we need to hire to achieve the talent agenda. It's more changing the proposition to how do we make the business successful by getting the right talent, the right people within budget at the right time to ensure we ship product or hit revenue milestone. Yeah.
Where do you think the future of TA, well, not where, what do you think this future of TA looks like? What does business success look like for us, say, in the next 2 to 3 years?
Yeah. I think business growth in the next couple of years will not just depend on our ability to attract amazing people at scale. It actually, value creation for people teams, TA teams, means up-leveling the whole spectrum of talent. So from workforce planning, org design to talent management. And it requires us to step outside of the comfortable recruiting only lane as well. Taking ownership for, let's call it quality of hire or long-term employee lifetime value. That's ultimately where I believe TA has a role to play. So staying relevant actually means being super deliberate about what we do, how we expand our scope, how we do it, and then how we allocate spare capacity as well. So precious TA resources and business resources need to be allocated to the right areas. And I think that's where the next couple of years are going to be incredibly important because TA is expected to nail delivery. I think that's the foundation. If you're not delivering on hiring plan execution, there's no point showing up as an advisor and guiding on talent management. Like that's the basics you need to fulfill. But at the same time, we need to create those learning paths and get ready to be advisors. So data fluency, consultative skills, being able to adopt responsible AI and provide holistic talent management. I think that's a super exciting journey, but we need to get ready for it.
I see a lot of people already kind of starting this motion, and it's more, to be honest, it's definitely more the leaders driving this, because I think they've got a bigger vision of what's around. But from an IC level, hearing it, just fly out your mouth there, it should be a wake up call to go into the rest of this year and go thinking, okay, what can I do? How can I develop myself? How can I make sure that, I am valuable to the business outside just filling roles? I have one final question. But before we kind of get to it, I just want to say thank you for this, by the way. It's really nice to kind of peel back some of the layers from someone who's worked at businesses that we wouldn't necessarily be able to get that insight and knowledge and awareness from. So thank you so much. If people want to continue this conversation with you further, where is the best place that they can pick up the conversation? Where's the best place they can find you?
Yeah, LinkedIn's absolutely the best place to get in touch. And I'm always keen to talk with others about company building and how we help the business be successful in the long run.
Perfect. And my final question for you is this then. We've seen hypergrowth, we've seen hyper consolidation. Where do you think the next 2 years is going to look like? Do you think we're going to see very much of what we're seeing right now with hiring, or do you think we're going to start seeing more growth happening across companies?
I genuinely believe we will see a continued correction of the market, actually away from hypergrowth, and we will have continued focus on really lean teams that bring in the right capabilities, the right mix of human and technology integration to get ready for the future. But I think what's going to be super important is genuine agility and the ability to learn fast, because no one has the perfect skills-based workforce plan in their pocket, and it changes on a monthly basis. So yes,
I appreciate that.
Hiring will stay fairly conservative, except for some of those players that are growing really aggressively.
Thank you so much. And once again, thank you for being part of this. I appreciate that. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Awesome. Thank you.
Bye.